All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for the kind of clunky nature of these meetings, but we'll do the best we can with Zoom. The first item on our agenda are the minutes from the last time. So if we have a motion, I'd certainly welcome one.
I move to approve.
Okay, who was that? Is that Dan?
No.
John, move to approve. Who wants the second?
Charlie.
Charlie seconding. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you for that. Next thing that I'll just make sure that everybody's aware of, it's a little different here because we don't we don't have a sign-up sheet, but we ask everybody just to make everyone aware that they will be testifying under oath tonight if they do share any information. And that oath statement says, "I solemnly swear or affirm under the pains and penalty of perjury that the statements I make, testimony I give, and other evidence I submit to the board at the board's public hearing held on this date shall be true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief." And so anybody that does speak to the board tonight, they will be speaking pursuant to that oath. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Next item on our agenda is a disclosure of ex parte communications or conflicts of interest regarding the matter this evening. So are there any board members that have any conflict of interest or a disclosure of any ex parte communications?
Nope.
Seeing none. Okay. And I should mention, just to make absolutely clear, although I am kind of dealing with the Zoom meeting technical aspects, that Charles Kopp is the chairperson and will be making any final decisions regarding procedure and relevant information and how we proceed. So Charlie's in charge, but I've got to deal with the Zoom control. So Charlie lets me take care of that. But he'll jump in if there's anything that he feels he needs to.
Don't forget to tell him that my picture has my wife's name on it because this is her pad.
Oh, okay. Yes. So you see, Charlie Kopp is actually Jennifer Kern, alternative name, but that's Charles, in case anybody's wondering. And Tim, we didn't get a chance to say hello to you. So hello, you're with the applicant, correct? Tim Wilkins?
Yes, I am. I'm one of the owners.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to get to our first and only hearing this evening. It's Karen Post and Diane Allard at 221 Northside Drive. These folks are seeking approval for the construction of a retail self-storage facility at that location. And if I'm not mistaken, Jason Dolmich is representing the applicant. And Jason, you're going to give a presentation, a brief presentation. Before we do that, I just want to call to the board's attention that I did send to you earlier today. A letter from Lucinda Thompson, who is a budding property owner, and a letter from Chris Dussault. And they're both represented here this evening, so I'm not going to read through those letters. They can certainly present their positions this evening, but those letters did have to do with concerns regarding stormwater and or flooding. That's what those were about. So this property is in the floodplain, so that's where that comes from. So Jason, why don't you give us a presentation, then we'll open it up to the board members, and then for the folks who are on the call or on the meeting with us, we'll open it up to you folks to express your concerns, questions, etc. So Jason, take it away.
And Dan, just as a point of order, have you enabled screen sharing?
Just as a point of order, no. So I can do that. So you can share the screen, and I think that is taken care of now.
Okay, I will make an attempt. All right. So good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Dolmich. I'm with MSK Engineers. I'm representing Patriot Holdings as the applicant who is proposing to construct a retail self-storage facility at 221 Northside Drive, currently owned by Karen Post and Diane Allard. Project is located in the planned commercial district. We've proposed meeting the design standards in this case due to the nature of the structures by screening the facility from view. And in addition to that, the pedestrian access to the site will be achieved by constructing a new path and sidewalk from the Dunkin' Donuts. I'll make sure I can. spotlight. By the Dunkin' Donuts at the which is the end of the existing pedestrian access on Emma Street to the proposed rail trail location, which is hopefully going to get under construction this summer. And then by providing pedestrian access to the facility from there. We have been in communication with the landowner and the town of Bennington, landowner being Shires Housing, to be allowed to construct this with the assumption that the town of Bennington will then take it over as a part of their trail system. The project, as Dan noted, is also located in Bennington's flood hazard zone, and it's been designed in accordance with those standards. We've submitted these plans plus the elevation certificates that we provided to the state, and they have commented and noted that the project structures have been raised at least 1 foot in order to be reasonably safe from flooding. I did have a conversation with the abutting landowner of the corporation Caldwell Labs earlier in the week or last week with respect to their concerns about flooding. And I understand that they are concerned about increases in flood hazard area. My response to that, to respond to that, to provide some context to the board, is that this project has been designed in accordance with the NFIP rules, which is that the proposed project has been raised above to be reasonably safe from flooding, has been raised above that, and has also not proposed any impacts on the floodway, which is located in this particular location here. And I would just note that the property in question, the structure is partially in the floodplain, and that this partially in the floodway, and that this project will not change either the underlying assumptions of the flood insurance rate map or this particular project's flood hazard classification. In addition, I did receive a copy of Ms. Thompson's letter of concern, and I just want to note that this project has been designed in accordance with the Vermont Stormwater Management Manual, and is subject to Vermont state stormwater standards. All of the proposed impervious on this project is planned to be routed to the stormwater practice in accordance with the permit that we're submitting, and that particularly, I believe one of her main concerns is where roof runoff or impervious land acreage would impact her property here to the south. I just want to note, I accept that these plans are ambiguous as to what direction the rooftops are supposed to run. But in order to capture and treat them in accordance with the standard, they have to be routed internal to the property and to the stormwater treatment practice, so that these rooftops will not be discharged to the neighboring property. And with that, I will, Dan, do you want me to stop sharing my screen and then I can open it up to questions?
Yeah, let's stop sharing. You may have
Okay.
to bring it back up, but that's
Sure.
easier for folks, I think. So if there's any board members who have any questions that they'd like to ask the applicant, I'd ask the board members to go ahead and do that before we open it up to the other folks in the meeting. So Ron looks like he's got his hand up.
Yeah, hey, Jason, that's on approximately a 6-acre lot, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Oh, looks like Bill Barney. Bill.
Yeah, Jason, how much have you elevated the site?
Depending in the area, it's between it can be between 3 and 5 feet.
And all the impervious area is going to be paved?
Correct.
Okay, and is there any maintenance program or anything for the settling pond?
For the infiltration basin?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, there is. There's going to be
Yeah.
one. Okay, all right.
Well, they have a sediment forebay that they're going to have to keep clean.
Right.
There is some internal closed conduit system that's proposed to be installed, and that's all going to be running to that sediment forebay. The stormwater infiltration basin needs to be kept reasonably free of silt, and that the discharge swale and level spreader are all going to require annual inspections and recertifications of compliance at, I think, either 3 or 5 years. I can't remember what the current standard is for the new permits.
Who does the inspection? And
So the annual inspections, and it technically can be completed by the owner or operator or their operator, but the restatement of compliance is required, like I said, every 3 or 5 years by a licensed professional engineer.
okay, all right, thanks.
Looks like Dan Malmberg has a question.
If the site was not in compliance during those inspections, what could possibly be done other than desilting the pond to bring it into compliance?
So yeah, we have to do these inspections and recertifications all the time for facilities all over town. And traditionally what we see that are non-compliant items are either woody vegetation in infiltration basins or stormwater ponds, sediment buildup in the forebays or the infiltration basins themselves, or woody vegetation in swales, or the sumps in the catch basins being full of silt. So those are very, very common issues that facilities like these have. And you basically come up with a maintenance checklist, and you have the landowner complete that maintenance activity as a part of during the sometime during the year, and then once they've completed it, you file a recertification. So there is a check that happens during that time period. We don't recertify it until the maintenance items are complete, or equivalent.
And then one more. All the snow disposal is it gonna be on the north portion of the lot by the brook?
So I'm going to reshare my screen now, just briefly. We had anticipated a snow storage area here at the sort of the end of these buildings in this section, or we had anticipated doing some snow storage outside of the 50-foot buffer of the stream that would allow for them to push snow in these areas over here.
Okay, any other board members at this time have any questions? Obviously, you'll be able to ask them later if they come up. But it looks like, okay, it looks like all the board members have had their initial questions answered. So I'm just going to go through the folks that have joined us, and I'm going to start with Andy Anderson, since he's starts with A. We'll just start alphabetically. Andy, do you have any comments, concerns, questions for the applicant? And if you could run through your questions and concerns, and then we could allow the applicant to answer all those at once, that would probably be the most efficient.
Just one that just came up is, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Andy.
Okay. Yeah. One that just came up is, how far is the fence line to the 50-foot buffer that you're proposing to dump the snow?
Shall I answer that now? Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
I'll just reshare my screen. So the anticipation is that there would be an access gate placed here in between the buildings. And we have, let me give you an exact measurement.
Okay.
So between in that one region where we have the most space, it's between 30 and 40 feet in width.
30 and 40 feet between, so all the snow of that 6-acre property, or whatever you're gonna pave, is gonna be moved into 30, 40 feet?
That's one location. There's another location on the eastern side of the property that we've identified for snow storage as well.
So it's 30 to 40 feet between the buffer line, the 50-foot buffer, and where you're gonna plow to, right? Or the fence line.
In the location that we've identified for snow storage, correct?
So by the time you push it out there and get a plow going through there with all that, you think you're gonna be able to hit that target? Keep it from 50 feet?
Well, that's in that region. That is also the tree line, which we are not proposing to modify. So that is the area that they have available to them in that location.
What do you mean there's a tree line? Can you put your, what do you mean by it's a tree line? A tree line is right next to the pond, literally right next to the stream, brook.
The tree line in that location is located just
Right.
outside of the floodway.
Not
And this
true.
is the open area.
Yeah, that's not right, but the tree line is literally up against the brook. So I think you're gonna have a problem with that. There's no doubt if it's only 30, 40 feet from the fence, you're not gonna be within the buffer, first of all. And then, second of all, we do have a concern. I know you and I, Jason, talked about it, and my partner Chris would have something to say about it as well. We think that raising that property to the point that it does eliminates flood zone. The water that would come from the brook would naturally go into that area, will now be directed at our building. Literally, and that obviously you're going to have a chance to address it again for these guys, but I think we're definitely concerned that you're pointing water right at the back of our building, higher waters and more velocity, and we think that's going to cause us problems, not only erosion but potentially structural damage to this building, and that's something I heard your explanation, and we still think that it's an issue.
Andy, do you have any other concerns? I want to get all of your concerns on the
Yes.
record and then allow Jason
I'm
to
gonna let Chris
respond.
take over here, Dan. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a question about if I get this wrong, you designed this in accordance with the floodplain design criteria. What is that close or what?
The town of Bennington has flood hazard standards. So Dan, I correct me if I'm wrong. There is trying to remember the specific name of that flood overlay district.
Well, I can answer that question.
Coming up short. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So there's federal, state, and local floodplain regulations. This particular project has been designed to meet all three. They become progressively actually more stringent. The local regulations are more stringent than the state, and the state are more stringent than the federal. But these are standards that FEMA recommends that we adopt, and the state recommends that we adopt, and we have adopted them in this particular project, and all projects in the floodplain have to follow those guidelines. And those guidelines are basically that you have to elevate all structures 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation, and you have to make sure you cannot construct any structures within the floodway, which is the area Jason can certainly articulate better than I can, but it's the flood carrying. It's the area that the feds have decided is the area that shouldn't be disturbed, so there's adequate flood carrying ability for the river.
Okay, so that design criteria. So the design criteria, is it like a discrete type of design criteria, meaning, are there sections that where you have to create designs based on adjacent properties. Meaning, if you have a floodplain that's out in the middle of nowhere and there's no other structure, is it the same design criteria as opposed to this particular instance where you have a floodplain and you have adjacent properties? Is it the same design criteria
Yes.
regardless of the adjacent properties?
Yes, that's why they have the floodway identified. You have to stay out of the floodway, but otherwise you can elevate in the floodplain.
Okay.
Well,
When was the floodway created? I mean, how does it go right through our building then?
the floodway is as Dan pointed out, is the width that that carries the floodwaters based on the NFIP's National Flood Insurance Rate Program's analysis of the river.
So that was applied after our building was built, or I mean, under that criteria, our building would not have been allowed to have been built there.
That's
correct. You could not build your building today in that location.
Or you could build it, but you would have to amend the flood maps. You would have to go through a LOMAR process, letter of map revision.
Okay, so you might want to explain
Well, I asking about regarding that you said that you designed it based on the criteria. Criteria doesn't take into consideration adjacent properties. So just by, it's a little bit me misrepresenting in that, well, because you follow the design criteria, we should be good, we should be safe. But based on that, I don't think that is necessarily the case, because the design criteria isn't considering adjacent properties based on how the design is meant to go.
I want to be clear. I didn't say your property was safe.
Oh, okay. All right.
I said that your property is not safe. And at the end of this project, it will still not be safe, right? It will not be differently unsafe.
So
I don't want to get a back and forth here. So Andy and Chris, I want to make sure that all of your concerns are on the record, and then we're going to move on to other folks. And we're not going to do a debate. You guys.
That's fine. Dan. We respect that.
I do have another concern regarding not necessarily the river where the.
I can't hear the speaker.
Chris, we can't hear you.
Breaking up.
So if the river, so that was in concern if the river were to crest its banks, but I do have another concern regarding rain runoff, in that right now that floodplain, that again the water is able to sprawl out over that entire area, and the way the design is laid out, where all of the drainage now is going to be directed down to the basin, which is next to our building, next to our property. What happens if that basin overflows? Right now, again, if you get to that point, the water can migrate, everywhere throughout that floodplain. But now it's being manipulated and funneled down to that pond, which is again closer to the building. What happens if that pond overflows? Where's that water going to go?
Jason, do you want to respond to that flood, stormwater?
Sure. It will go in the direction of the river, and the conveyance structure is at an elevation lower than your structure.
The
So it's being directed back.
Base of the basin is exactly our elevation.
I said the conveyance, which is coming out of the basin.
Conveyance coming out of the.
And I think in layman's terms, you mean that was direct to the river.
The swale. Yep.
So that swale sort of ends at the river. It doesn't even actually on your drawing. There's no dike, or it kind of ends before the river. You see what I'm saying on your drawing? And we're
It's being conveyed to a level spreader. So the idea is that, and that level of spreader has been designed to accommodate the passage of a 100-year storm event.
Would there be any problems in building a dike sort of situation there? Adding that to the design?
I'm confused what you're asking for.
So where that, the swale ends on the north, I recall northwest side of right behind our building. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but there's like looks like you're building a swale there. And then it kind of ends. And I'm asking if is there any sense in continuing it, maybe damming it better towards directing anything that might be pointed at our building towards the river?
Well, the conveyance from the stormwater pond is not directed towards your building. And
That's not the question.
but I don't have the design calculations on hand, but I would review to see whether there's already adequate freeboard in that swale, which would preclude the need for any additional berming along the backside of your property.
I have one more question on this. You said that the design criteria was that you needed to raise the elevation at least 1 foot above the existing grade. I got that correct?
No, the existing flood elevation.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what I've seen by the drawing, I'm curious as to why that land right immediately parallel to the river is raised up 5 feet. Why was it raised so high? If the design criteria is that a minimum of 1 foot raised up above that flood area.
No, that's Jason. Can you explain to him what a flood? It's not the existing grade. It's where the area will flood.
So the base flood elevation of this parcel across the site is 5. Hold on a second. The whole parcel's flood elevation is at 592, and so at the area directly adjacent to your property is at 589. So in that location, we're raising those buildings to 593, so 1 foot above the base flood elevation.
So you're taking the elevation in the farthest corner away as your reference height, your reference elevation?
Chris, I want to stop you there because I don't think you're understanding the point. He has to put enough fill on that property to raise it above the 100-year flood elevation as determined by FEMA. So it has nothing to do. The engineer doesn't have any choice with regard to that. Those are the regulations set by the feds, the state, and the town of Bennington. I can understand if you like that, but that's what they're required to do. Does that make any sense? Is that clear?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand that. And,
okay.
And they're probably doing that for a reason.
It's required by the state and the feds in the town of Bennington.
Yes.
They have to do to develop that property.
Mm.
Not saying that's good or bad for your property, but that's if they are to build anything on that property, they must elevate 1 foot above the floodplain. That's required by the state and the town and the feds.
Okay.
So, Andy and Chris, do you have any other further questions? Because I would like to move on to other folks who have concerns, because it seems like we're being.
One other thing, we have a absolutely abandoned storage system right across the street from us, and I think you said there was some kind of was there. What was the reason for that being abandoned? You mentioned it to me that it was like, maybe was there some environmental issues there or not?
No, I don't recall any environmental issues. Although, Andy, I do have to say, that's irrelevant to this particular inquiry. So.
Well, where I was going is if you said I was wondering if this property had similar issues that would lead to the same sort of abandonment that we have right across the street from us. so that we don't get called rusty storage land instead of Bennington.
Okay, do you have any other questions or concerns before we move on to other property owners?
No.
We could come back, Andy. I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to.
Is there a time limit on this meeting?
No, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to run through their first question.
Yeah, I get that. I
If there's
understand.
any follow-up, we can do that.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Let's go to Lucinda. Would you like to ask any questions or comments or raise any concerns?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm sitting here with my husband, Latchmet, who also is a PE, and I think he has some comments that he would like to make concerning it.
So Lucinda, can you repeat his name for the minutes, please?
It's George Latimer Schmidt.
Okay, great. Thank you, George.
And she seems to have a high regard for me for some reason and seems to think I have all the answers. But, I live with her and she owns the Bennington Lanes. We do share about a 400-foot property line with the subject parcel. And, the back of our property, Cindy's property, gets a lot of runoff from the roofs of the storage building and the bowling alley and the dairy bar and parking lot. We're concerned about flow from the development onto her property, aggravating that wetness situation. And if you go out there today, you'll find that it is pretty wet. The ground is frozen, of course, and we had rain today. But seasonally, if we get a thunderstorm, it's wet in that forested area. It dries out, especially when there's transpiration through the roots of the trees. But what I see on the design, and I'm very pleased to hear that the roof will be drained to the stormwater system, but still we have a 15-foot setback, and the first floor of the building is raised to, it's hard to say exactly, but it looks like between 4, 5, and 6 feet above Cindy's property. And there's not a lot of good topography on the drawing I reviewed. So we have that 15-foot strip that's about 400 feet and 6,000 square feet or so. And then we have the road, which is being raised 2 feet in front of the office, which is directing water onto that land. And, Jason spoke of the snow storage in the back. And I think as that melts, it's got to go somewhere. So we're concerned about additional. And I guess a question for Jason is, Vermont's standard for stormwater control and regulation. I thought most places required that you do not increase the flows onto adjacent properties for stormwater from that site. Is that the case in Vermont? Because I worked in New York for 35 years, so I'm not as familiar with Vermont's requirements.
The standards.
I'm going to ask you to hold your response so that we hear from all of the concerns, and then let you, rather than go back and forth, and then we'll let you guys follow up after Jason responds to your concerns. But do you have any other questions and concerns for Jason? And Jason, please take notes so you can respond to them.
Well, just my feeling is they're shoehorning a very intense development into a small area, buildable area. And, I'd certainly like to see a bigger buffer between our property. 15 feet, I think, is the minimum setback for the town. I would see that perhaps grading that to reduce the stormwater coming from his property onto ours, regrade it and make it low enough to maybe infiltrate into the ground, because I don't think he has the elevations there to convey to his stormwater system. But that's a question for him too. Water from the road is clearly going to come onto Cindy's property because he's raising it 2 or 3 feet at the office. The road ends and then the whole site is being raised, I understand, to get above the floodway. That's a concern. So I guess those are our basic concerns. You have anything else, Cindy?
Just water concerns.
Water concerns.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to let Jason respond, and then if you guys have any follow-up, obviously, we'll let you do that.
Okay.
So Jason, could you respond to those concerns that have been raised?
So just so I'm clear, I'm going to ask some clarifying questions, if that's all right. Lat, your you're concerned about runoff from the graded area in between the building to your parcel?
Yes, that's correct. And the road and the snow storage area on
Well,
the end.
so the road grading, as it's shown on the plan, is directed away from the subject parcel. And particularly in the location around the office, that is all graded to the sediment forebay.
Pardon? Say that again?
The area in front of the office, which is new impervious, is graded towards the sediment forebay. And you have an existing paved drive in that location already. So there's already impervious in the grading area, getting to the elevation of the building. And that right now, that is, while it's just the area getting to, like there's about 20 feet to get up to the landing, which we raise at a 5% grade to get you to that parcel, to that location by the office. That's graded in the direction of the southwest, which is away from your property. So I
Okay,
don't
but
see.
the edge of the road is going to be graded towards Cindy's property, and the setback from the building, and there's water going to be bouncing off the roof when it rains heavily. What about water from that area? That increases the shed. The other thing is we don't have good topography in there. I didn't see any elevations on the drawings you prepared that give me a clear picture of how water drains once it goes over the property line onto our property.
You're correct.
No,
The topography on your property is not noted, but I did have it updated because I read your letter of concern.
okay.
Generally speaking, this entire site, including yours, including the neighboring properties, grade from east to west. So the question that I had when I was looking at your concern was whether I was going to create an impounding issue of your runoff running onto this. And I think, in my brief review of that, the answer is the runoff that you guys get. One, it's it's very flat. You can see from the contours whether they be labeled or not. There's a whole bunch of pond depressions and lots of little
Right, I agree.
mounds.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's very little grade at all on your subject parcel that you're talking about. And so the question was, is that already draining to the north? And the answer that I came to from my review is that it's draining to the west. That this is a shallow graded site that generally travels in the direction from east to west. So
can you answer the question about the standard for runoff from a development parcel onto adjacent properties?
Well, so I will admit that I was not particularly sensitive to a small strip of grassed area running off onto a parcel. I don't see that as a substantial change. However, we can certainly adjust the grading to ensure that there's a depression, that there's an infiltrating area between the 15-foot buffer and the bottom and the toe of the slope. But it was absolutely my intent to run the impervious area to the stormwater treatment practices, which is what the Vermont standard requires.
But does Vermont allow you to put additional stormwater runoff onto adjacent properties with new development?
Well, given the fact that I did not believe functionally that we would be doing that, I did not research that with respect to this project. Our standard is not to add additional discharge to adjacent properties, because it's not in addition to whatever state standards there are also civil standards with respect to it as well.
I'll grant you it's sheet flow, and it's over 6,000 square feet approximately, 400 times 15. That's not a huge area. That's a fraction of an acre, but it is runoff.
And I think
would
we can
be-
address your concern
Okay.
by providing a depression along the fence line in that location.
Okay, I'd be very pleased to see a detail on that. And your upgraded topography, if possible. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments, concerns from Lucinda and George at this time? No one has to stay quiet forever, but okay. And I also have with us, it looks like Brooke. Brooke, do you have any comments, concerns, questions? I guess not from Brooke. I'm now going to go to another person who has joined. I don't know who it is. It's just a phone number. So caller ending in 4840. You are muted right now, but if you unmute yourself, do you have any questions, concerns regarding the project? And can you introduce yourself and give us a name for the minutes?
Yes, Dan Monks, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Sam. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Sam Racino, and I have some concerns of the proposal of this storage facility on Northside Drive.
Okay,
Seems
just to
that Northside
clarify,
Drive-
Sam, just to clarify, you do not live in the vicinity, but you're interested in the project?
Right, I have concerns with.
Okay, I just want to make
Northside
sure that
Drive.
everybody knows that you're not one of the abutters, but you do have concerns. So go ahead, Sam.
No, I don't have a buttress. I once lived on North Bennington Road. I know of the property there. I knew of the drive-in, but I want to add a different perspective that people haven't thought about. Obviously,
Okay.
how many storage facilities are going to be built into this area? 100, 75, 80? What was the number of storage facilities?
Jason, can you give, I don't think that's the question, Sam, but how many square feet are we talking about, Jason? Can you tell us?
No, I'm talking about numbers because I want to know how much traffic is going to be developed of people going in and going out. Because as you know, Northside Drive is heavily trafficked, and I have a concern of people egressing out, exiting out. There shall only be a right-hand turn only, not a left-hand turn lane. You have a turning lane with the coming out of that property. How, as a DRB board, you're going to handle that situation of traffic trying to cross lanes if people decide to make a left-hand turn? When they come out of it, they're going to have to be a right-hand turn. A prime example is the next door property, which is American Legion. They've got a traffic light. Is a traffic light going to be installed so this way said direction can be held so traffic can make a choice turning left or right? That's one of my concerns. Secondly, I think there's better use of this property instead of sprawl. I do have the same concerns as Andy mentioned, that which is irrelevant to this discussion, that there is an abandoned storage facility. I'm fearful that if this does not work out well, we could have another abandoned storage facility. We've got one on Morris Road. We've got one that has just been built on Hicks Avenue. There's better usage of this property. Being on a floodplain, I don't know what could be there. Solar panels, we are in a shortage of housing. Maybe housing could be going into that area. Those are my concerns.
Okay, Sam, thank you. I'm going to let Jason answer the traffic question because I know, Jason, you guys had submitted some traffic information. Perhaps you could share with Sam and the rest of the folks the traffic results.
That's correct. I had a traffic engineer review this, just do a desktop review of the proposed square footage and the potential traffic impacts. Believe it or not, this, based on the ITE, this facility will create 6 peak hour AM 6 AM peak hour and 11 PM peak hour trips, which compared to 10,000 vehicle trips per day for Northside Drive. And if we're looking at AM peak, it's 580 to 680 vehicle trips per hour on Northside Drive and 950 to 1,045 vehicle trips per hour in the PM peak hour. So we're adding less than 1% to either peaks.
Okay. While we have all the property owners, the abutting property owners, do any of the DRB board members have any questions for the abutting property owners before we let them kind of jump back in with any final concerns? Anyone? Okay. So Andy and Lucinda, do you have any follow-up concerns before we decide whether we're gonna what we're gonna do with whether we're gonna continue this or close and go into deliberative session? So do you have any questions, concerns, comments that you didn't mention earlier that you'd like to make sure the board is aware of?
I do have one thing I just want to add.
Okay.
Say, we are not against the actual facility, what they're proposing, right? We don't, I don't think anybody has the right to determine what people do with their own land. What I am concerned with is damaging our property. So that's what we're worried about. And if, we don't know if it's good or bad for us, but that's not our right. But it is, a major concern that if what they're doing can damage our property, eventually that's what we're afraid of. So, we're not against them doing what they want to do. We're against the potential damage. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chris. Lucinda and George, do you have any final thoughts, comments that you'd like to make sure the DRB is aware of that you haven't expressed already?
As I said, my only concern is water. I had no issues with water in or around my building, damaging my building, and I would like to keep it that way.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so any final questions that the board may have before we Ron?
Yeah, Dan, just a comment. I believe Jason said they were going to change the one part of it, change it on the plan. Is that correct, Jason?
We're getting some feedback. Can somebody mute themselves? I think it might be Sam.
Yeah, I'm going to mute him. Okay. Try it, Ron. Sorry.
What were the, if I remember correctly, I did not take notes, unfortunately. I think Jason mentioned they would make a couple of changes on the plan to accommodate a request from Lucinda and George. Is that correct?
So, Jason, can you address that?
Whoops. That's the plan. This is the plan set. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
There was one thing about the grass and so forth that you were going to make a change on, I believe. On the plan.
The concern raised by George by Lat was the runoff from the grassed area here that's being created, the sloped area along the edge. I proposed that we provide a depression along this section to capture any runoff from the grassed area so that it does not discharge to the Thompson property.
Okay, and if that is done, two things: we could either have to come back to those plans, or we could possibly have Dan confirm that you have done this to George and Lucinda's concerns. We could do that.
Right. So Ron, we could talk about how best to accomplish that, whether it's, revised plans that you review, or if you put it as a condition, but we can talk about that, what's best for the board moving forward. So.
Session, right? Okay.
And I am getting some feedback. I don't know what that is. So if you're not muted, please do so. Okay. Any more questions that the board may have for Jason or the board or the folks here? Because then we're gonna make a decision about how the board wants to proceed. Unless you have any further questions for the folks here. Okay, I don't see any.
When will we know?
So Andy, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to find out in a minute. So the board, you have a couple of options. You could, and I think I would suggest one of the later two. The first option is you could deliberate and vote now in open session. You could continue the meeting until the next DRB regularly scheduled meeting, or you could close this meeting and go into closed deliberative session. So those are your three options. And it's up to you folks to make a motion in open session about how you'd like to proceed at this time. So I guess I would ask you to, I'd ask one of you folks who feels.
I would move that we go into to a deliberative session, please.
Okay, Ron has moved that we go into deliberative session. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So Bill has seconded that. So all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed or any? Okay, so that motion has passed. And so Andy, Lucinda, et cetera, everybody who's on this meeting, what that means is the board will go into closed deliberative session at this time. They'll make a decision and they'll have to come out and they'll have to issue a written decision that will then be sent to all of you folks that participated. Then, as you folks know, there is a 30-day appeal period. If you're unsatisfied with that decision and you feel that you'd like to have an environmental court review it, you have 30 days from that date of that decision to do so. And so all of you folks who have spoken this evening will get that written decision and you'll have that option moving forward. So I want to thank everybody for participating. This is really tough. It's not the same as a regular meeting, but I hope everyone felt like they had an opportunity to express themselves and express their concerns. What will happen next is I will ask folks to please sign off from the meeting, and then the board will go into deliberative session. Are there any final questions before we close and go into deliberative session? Anyone? Okay, great. Thank you again, everybody, for participating. Really appreciate. Again, I know this is a little difficult for some folks. At least it is for me. Not the same as a regular public meeting. So I'll ask everybody to leave the meeting except for the board members, and then we'll as I said, we'll come up with a written decision, and that will be it'll be given to all you folks. If you do want to chat with me tomorrow to get an indication of the preliminary decision before it's written up, I'd be happy to talk to any folks, or you could also send me an email and I'd be happy to follow up. But until the decision is actually written up and sent out, it's not final, just to be clear. But I can give you certainly an indication tomorrow about what that decision will be after the board deliberates. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Everybody.
Thank you.
And Linda, thank you so much for taking minutes.
Dan, I need a motion to close the meeting.
Oh, good. Okay. You know what? That's why we have you here. So, Charlie,
I move to close the meeting.
do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Bill's going to second it. All in
All
favor?
right.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Any
Perfect.
opposed?
Thank you.
All right, Linda, thanks for reminding us about that. Okay. All right, Cat TV, thank you very much. We're going to go into deliberative session now.